Yeah, so that's all I'm saying is that like you should have the I just hate these types of movies where they don't like they could have got a deaf actor because that's just what like it would have been right to have like Alan Arkin
Yeah.
whatever, but like you could have had a deaf actor who could have done this just as well, but of course they always have to go with like a name and it's just I don't
If
know.
Alan Arkin were really committed to the bit, he would have intentionally, listened to really loud things beforehand.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like, a typical missed opportunity. They could have hired a deaf actor and they didn't, and I just didn't like that. So but we'll get into that. We'll get into that in the part 2, I'm
What
just
was Alan
disappointed.
Arkin known for before this movie?
The Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. Which
Is
is a
that a
comedy.
movie?
Name of a movie?
Oh, I have it in my notes, y'all. Come on.
That's just the.
No, it's a play.
I was about to say that sounds like a bill from like 1955 in the U.S.
You gotta
Congress.
see the Russians are coming. The Russians are coming.
Oh, he was in Wait Until Dark.
What is that?
That is an Audrey Hepburn movie.
Oh.
It's pretty good. It's the same premise as Don't Breathe, sort of.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They updated it. All right.
Wait. Okay. Never mind. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. I'm curious now about Audrey Hepburn's role in that movie.
She is basically the old blind person. Well, not the old blind person, but in Don't Breathe, it's the old blind
person. Yet again, another person with disabilities not cast in a role.
True.
There you go. Come on, Audrey.
We got Don't Breathe. We got Wait Until Dark. Hard as Lonely Hunter.
It's rude.
What are these movies?
I mean, come on. You tell me there's not a deaf actor? Come on, please. Whatever. All right, here we go. In 3.
Wait, I'm sorry. I forgot our order.
Oh, Andrew and then you.
Okay, thank you.
In 3, 2, 1. And welcome to episode 343 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Michael O'Malley.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we're going to kick off our short Patreon Picks series with 1968's The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, which was picked for us by Ron Hayes. So,
thank you, Ron.
Yeah, nice little adaptation of a book. But first, let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And honestly, excited to talk about this first one because it's the first time in our history that we're going to talk about a Steven Spielberg movie that Andrew liked.
Dang.
I don't think that I have ever been outwardly negative about Steven Spielberg. Have I? Can you think of a time?
I mean, we ragged on Ready Player One pretty hard, and
which is fair.
Ready Player One.
I'm a Spielberg fan, and I did not like Ready Player One.
Yeah, that's fair. But anyway, let's talk about the Fabelmans.
Yeah.
I caught this at TIFF, so I'm going to turn it over to you all to because I wrote about it and talked about it on the podcast already. So I'm going to turn it over to you all to talk a little bit about the Fabelmans.
Well, Michael, I want to hear from the resident Spielberg hater, Andrew.
Here's the thing: I'm not a resident Spielberg hater.
He doesn't hate Spielberg.
Relatively,
he's just always he's very like agnostic to Spielberg.
So I think the thing with me about Spielberg is that there are a lot of like mega fans of Spielberg who consider him like one of the greatest formalists of all time, and like he is in a sense that he like almost in the same way that like you could say that D.W. Griffith is like setting what the like the cinematic language of a type of movie, right?
Also has some troubling movies regarding race.
Not to the extent that D.W. Griffith.
Yeah, I don't know if he hits.
I think that would be offensive to say. But I've never like loved his movies, right? They are such like the template for what the studio blockbuster is that I've never personally connected to one in the way that I think a lot of people have. But like if you go down the list of the movies that he's really known for, I've seen and liked to some extent pretty much all of them, or all the really big ones. But this is the first time that I have really, really been moved by a Spielberg movie. It is kind of going for a level of natural, like social realism that I am not used to seeing from him. But it is also really thoughtfully considered in terms of the way that it is shot. So it's more like the way in which we're kind of like setting in the pace of life with these characters, in the same way that you would see like in Boyhood or Lady Bird or what's the other big one, or Eighth Grade. But it is shot with like this really classical formal eye that Spielberg has, where like every individual image and like angle that we are choosing to look at these characters from is generally communicating something about them and how we're supposed to be feeling. Like every cut feels like it matters. It is like chosen, like that moment is chosen for a reason. There's a beautiful sequence right in the middle of it that is completely wordless, and it's intercutting between young Spielberg scrubbing through a bunch of footage that he has taken, and his mom playing piano, and his dad listening to the piano and like almost conducting along to it. That is all like perfectly like pieced together to like move with the music, and also like culminates in this really the end of the scene. So like it is an interesting fusion of like a type of movie I'm not used to seeing Spielberg do, and like that type of movie being infused with a very like, I don't know, classical eye, if that makes sense. But I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about it. There's a lot more, I think, to say about it if we get into the details, but what are y'all's feelings?
I mean, I thought it was really good. I'm kind of with you, Andrew, in the sense that I don't know that he's made a movie exactly like this before. But the interesting thing is, a lot of the component parts are like directly taken from other Spielberg movies. Like AI plays like a huge role in like the kind of like visual language and like thematic stuff in this movie. Also, like, of course, music by John Williams. The screenplay was co-written by Tony Kushner as well as Steven Spielberg, and of course, he's collaborated on Spielberg a number of times, or with Spielberg a number of times. He's got the cinematographer that he's had for a while working. So like, it is sort of interesting in which like it's like simultaneously like a different kind of Spielberg movie but also being like the most Spielberg movie in the sense of like the parts that it's assembled from. And I think that's kind of interesting for a film that is like, at least purportedly, and I think it's kind of sneaky about its relationship to this, but it's like purportedly like semi-autobiographical. And I think that's interesting that it's not just semi-autobiographical in the sense that Spielberg is going off his memories of his childhood, but it's also that he seems to be like pulling off of memories of his own career in evoking this movie. And I think that's cool.
And also calling into question how much we should take what we're seeing as like truly his childhood. Because of the way the movie acknowledges what movies do to like craft narratives and like tell people what they want you to think about them, or etc.
This is like a wildly, like, for a movie that is kind of like been purportedly like this is the movie that made Spielberg cry as he was making it, like it's about the joy of film or whatever. It's like not that, but it's also like surprisingly agnostic about the power of film, like the potential of film to manipulate reality. And it like at certain points seems kind of unsettled by that. Like, for instance, there's a key scene in the middle of the film in which it's the same scene that you were talking about, Andrew, in which like the act of having filmed something like makes like young, man, I forget what the Steven Spielberg character's name is supposed to be. Sam. Yeah, it makes young Sam's life like a lot less pleasant. Like the act of having filmed it like realizes something that was true, but it embodies it in a way that is very unpleasant for him. And that is like, that happens later in the movie with another character. Like he makes a school, like a film for his school. And one of the guys who gets depicted in the film is really unsettled by the way he was depicted for kind of the opposite reason, where he felt like the film depicted him in a way that was almost like glorifying him. And he knew that like he would never live up to that image of people. And so he was only like that people saw of him. and so the film kind of doomed him to never be as good as people remembered him being.
Right.
And that's just like really interesting and thorny, especially when you consider like Spielberg as a, like, the thing people will say about Spielberg is like, oh, besides just like the architect of the modern blockbuster, the stuff that you already said, Andrew, is like his sentimentality and his, or if you're like negative about it, like his ability to be a manipulative filmmaker, right? Which I've always thought is redundant because all film is manipulative in some respects, but I think Spielberg has always been fairly shameless about it in his career, like, and not willing to like hide behind like, you know, quote unquote realism or whatever, like, you know, a more high-minded filmmaker might
And I think
do.
it talks about the manipulation of film in a way that is simultaneously looking at that in a positive and a negative light, right? Like part of what is cool to Spielberg about making movies when he's like very young and in this movie is that he gets to find ways to move an audience, right? Like he finds ways to make them laugh. He finds ways to shock them, as like almost as like a gift, you know, like I'm giving you joy. But then it is also acknowledging the fact that like those things are always artificial constructions and you can't ever like truly present the truth on them. So you're always going to get like this very skewed, like one person singular vision of, you know, whatever the subject matter is.
Yeah, and more so than, or in addition to that, like there's this persistent thread through the film that the reason why Sam, and I guess by extension, like we're supposed to assume Spielberg, like one is so compelled by film, is because it gives him an opportunity to control reality. Like there's the very first sequence in the film is them seeing The Greatest Show on Earth, which is a thoroughly mediocre movie, but I think is like funny. It has this sort of thing, kind of like the movie billboards in like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which are all these like really B tier like Hollywood films from the 60s, like where it shows like the subjectivity of in a moment like what cinema can do, even if it's not a conventionally great movie. But like the thing that strikes like Sam, who like this is his first movie he's seen in a theater, and he's like gripped by this scene that involves a train crash. And his parents kind of misinterpret this at first and thinking that he's really interested in trains, and so they give him a model train for his birthday or Hanukkah or for some gift giving occasion.
Hanukkah.
And he is repeatedly crashing this train, and they're getting upset because this is, you know, you're going to break your toy. But then they give him a camera, and what he starts doing is filming crashing the train over and over again. And like it's kind of a way, it's a little bit on the nose in the movie, but it's a way of him, like his parents realize it's a way of him controlling his fear of like having seen that, right? The ability to film it and recreate it shows that you can create that yourself. And that is like a power to like deal with unpleasantness in reality, is to be able to recreate it in film, because that shows that you have mastery over it in some way. And I think that like the film acknowledges that as like something that's very powerful and like can be like really rewarding, but is also there's like some really troubling undercurrents to that as well. Like I saw a Letterboxd user say this, and I think that they're right. Like the school film that he makes like quotes Nazi propaganda. Like I'm pretty sure it's meant to like.
I was unclear on that.
No, I don't know if it quotes it, but
it's evocative of it.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's the style is completely taken from Leni Riefenstahl, especially her Olympic film that she made.
Right, exactly, and I mean that's
because the beginning of that is like a bunch of pretty naked men like running around, you know, just kind of glowing like these Adonis type figures, and that's how he shows this guy in it.
Yeah, and I mean that again, like there's a few connections, not maybe quite so dark as that, but throughout the film where like the ability to like this desire to control things is almost portrayed as like there's something very troubling about that. There's another scene where right after his parents have told them that they're going to get divorced, like he goes and is editing a film, and his sister is coming in. She's like, I can't remember the exact conversation, but his sister is basically like, aren't you going to deal with this? Like, we got to talk about this. And he's like, no, I'm just editing my film. Right. And like, again, like there's this kind of like almost, I don't know, like I don't know if pathologic is
Antisocial.
too strong, but yeah, not just antisocial, but like there's a way in which the film complicates the gift of filmmaking to make it
Mhm.
not quite like always like the sunny thing. It's like something that has great potential for like both good as well as like maybe more kind of insidious things. I don't know. I think that's
Well,
really
that's
interesting.
well, that's unlocked in the whole interaction, the scene with Judd Hirsch, who plays his uncle,
Mhm.
and just that whole conversation that he has with him, where he's just he's just describing that himself and Sam's mother and Sam are all they're artists, and so they're having to fight like that you have family and friends and all this stuff, and you love them, but you love the camera and what that does a little bit more, and
Do
that's what
do we know
separates.
much about Spielberg's current like marriage family situation?
I know
He's
nothing about
married
it.
to shoot, what's her name from Temple of Doom?
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Oh, okay, cool.
I
Why do you
think.
ask?
Oh, because of that scene with the uncle where he goes on about how you have to choose between family or art. If this was Spielberg making like a very personal confessional movie, I was wondering if he like felt some sense of guilt that he had been distant from his own family, or if this is just a
Well, he did. So he had
past
a
parents kind of thing.
yeah, he had a first wife, who I think that might have dissipated because of the relationship he and Kate Capshaw had
Mm.
while making Temple of Doom. So it's not an entirely thorny love life, but he's been with her since like 1991. So,
Okay.
but no,
Also, we should. Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
no, you're fine. Go.
I was just going to say we should acknowledge, though maybe not spoil, just how amazing the cameo at the end of this
Oh, I
movie.
could watch that every day.
It was a terrific.
I could
Yeah,
watch that every day. Like it's like I was sitting there. I remember when I saw it at TIFF, and I like was like, "Holy shit, this is incredible!" And then like I knew it was coming when I rewatched it earlier this week, and I was like giddy excited knowing that it was coming up, and just the whole like the way from the minute the guy enters the room to the very end with like the sunset. I'm just like, this is fucking great. I
Oh
love
it
it.
yeah,
is like an
the
amazing
last
like
5 minutes of the
final
movie are
5 minutes.
incredible.
Just
Yeah.
perfect.
I think I expected going into this movie for it to be a little more like that, where there is a famous real life person being portrayed on the screen. Like I don't
Mm.
know, like
I thought it was going to go further into his career.
yeah, I think I thought a little bit of that. I guess I thought there would be more allusions to like famous folks, but there's really not that many.
Mm-mm.
There's like a very very small handful of not even a handful of them, like only a few, which I think is kind of cool. Like there's something like very um, I don't know, like Spielberg's dad, for instance, is like a big enough guy that he's got his own Wikipedia page for his like, contributions to like electrical engineering and computer
Yeah.
science and stuff. Like, and you would imagine that there would be a lot of like there could be the possibility for a lot of name dropping, with that sort of
Mm-hmm.
with those sort of connections. And there's like basically none of that. There's like a few things, but like, not there's not a lot. And like I think that the film is like impressive for as big and as like purportedly personal as it is. Like it is impressively focused on like basically exclusively on the role of filmmaking in
Mm-hmm.
like Sam's life and how like every event that is depicted in the film is affected by his interest in filmmaking,
Mm-hmm.
or how every event in his life affects his filmmaking. Like it's really there's really not like a scene that I can think of that doesn't have some connection there. Um, and so I think in a way like um, it's a lot less of an indulgent film than like you might expect
Yeah.
from
No.
like a film that is like supposed to be like this kind of autobiographical like late career treatise on like his own career.
Well, especially
It
those movies that are like kind of like this is why I make movies. Like, you
Yeah,
think of those. Like I saw
Mm-hmm.
the trailer before this one for the Sam Mendes one, and I'm like, that looks
yeah,
Oh yeah.
it just looks dreadful. And just a lot of movies like that are like you say, they're very self-indulgent. It's it's kind of showing off the movies that inspired them, and kind of name dropping and things like that. And this one, like you said before, like this one is really interrogating not only his style but like how he views movies. Like the second time watching it, I really drilled down on the commentary that it's making on the manipulation and just how manipulating film can be. You mentioned the scene with the high school bully at the end, and he breaks down pretty much because he's just like, you made me look like somebody who I'm not. Like I
One
look
of the most incredible scenes in that movie, honestly. Like I
it's
was on the
really
seat, like edge of my seat, watching that
it's
that
really
moment.
good because he's just like, you like literally you made me into a superhero pretty much, and
Mhm.
I'm not that. I'm just a normal stupid guy who will probably get some basic job and have a wife and kids and just have a basic life, and you made me look like a Greek god for 5 minutes on screen. And you're like, yeah, that's what movies do. You think of it made me think of like the entrance that you get from John Wayne in Stagecoach, where he
Mhm.
just like rides up on that horse and he's just like this Adonis, and you're just like, holy shit, like
Yeah.
this is insane. And things like that. Like I like, to me, that's really getting to the meat also of like commentating on his own movies, because it's like, yeah, movies are these machines to manipulate. And whether it's what you're seeing and kind of what you're perceiving, but also, like we talked about earlier, it manipulates in how there can be truth found in stuff that you shot, and you can edit around it, but that truth still holds because it was
Mhm.
filmed.
I want to also, I don't know how much time we want to spend on this movie, but I also want to like just like shout out Paul Dano and Michelle Williams are like both like excellent as
Yeah.
parents, and also their roles are like impressively tied into like this kind of like psychological battle in him, because his dad is like an engineer, and his mom is like an artist, right? Like a musician, um, and the kind of like the way that they form the kind of battling um like forces of his own psyche as he starts
Yeah.
approaching like filmmaking is like really impressive. And it's impressive, like I think not just because it's cool thematically, but it's able to do those things thematically while also not really making them feel like just like Freudian symbols in the film.
Yeah.
Like they actually feel like real people, even though like their role in the film is kind of schematic in the sense of like
Mhm.
the dad is always on the like the this brain type, and then the mom is always
Mhm.
this brain type, and it's hard to make those meet.
Speaking
Um,
of watching this movie a second time, it is so true what you're saying, because the first time you watch it through, it does feel so naturalistic, and these do
Mhm.
feel like such real live people who like could have actually been Spielberg's parents. Like they're that multidimensional and flawed and stuff. Um, but watching it the second time through, almost every single one of their like dialogue pieces in their scenes, or like the role they're playing in the scene, is to pull the kid in like one of those two like symbolic directions. Like in the very first scene, when we see the kid Spielberg in line to see The Greatest Show on Earth, he's scared about how big the people are going to look on screen, and his dad tries to comfort him by like intricately explaining the science of how film works to a child who does not understand anything. And Michelle
Yeah.
Williams says, movies are dreams. Like, and I was tracing it from that point on, like, wow, this is really like written. Um,
You think of like this. There's the scene, like midway through the movie when they're on the camping trip, and like Michelle Williams and Seth Rogen are like bending a
yes.
tree, and Paul Dano's over there like explaining the science between, but like of how you create fire to make it light.
And like the scene is blocked so amazingly too, because he's on the left, like exactly in the left half of the frame. She and Seth Rogen are exactly in the right half of the frame, and you see all the kids on the left until like their attention gets distracted over there, and it's like a Wes Anderson film. Let's like go over to the next
Yeah.
panel.
yeah,
Um,
it's really
Incredible.
cool.
Can we
I
also acknowledge? Oh, sorry, Michael. Did you have something
No,
else?
go ahead.
I was gonna say, can we also acknowledge how the scenes in this movie are so well constructed as like full scenes.
Yeah.
Like you were talking about how great the scene with the bully is, but there's so many scenes that like are that memorable to me throughout the movie because we're like they're living it for such a long time in most cases.
The camping, all the camping scenes are great, especially the one
Mhm.
where Michelle Williams is like dancing in the headlights.
Yeah.
Like, there's a long scene where she's like drunk, right? And she starts just dancing in the headlights, and then he starts filming it, and I don't know. And then the daughter is like unsettled by it. I don't know.
Well,
It's really beautiful.
But that also gets into just like that, not perversion, but just like what the movies can do. Like you think about Seth Rogen, Paul Dano, and Sam are sitting there watching her. Sam's recording, and like the daughter there's something wrong about this. She has like a nightgown on. You can kind of see through it. Like she's drunk. Like they're just sitting there staring at her.
Yeah,
and she kind of is like, "There's something wrong about this," but behind the lens of a camera, it's just this like beautiful, like ethereal moment. And that's just kind of fascinating.
Among my favorite scenes is the scene where he is attempted to be converted to Christianity.
Oh my god,
his high school girlfriend.
I love Jesus, and what is Jesus but a nice, cute little Jewish boy?
Yeah. Incredible, the audacity of this man to film that scene.
I like that he just had that scene in there, and it's just like a nice little comic break. It's just like, what if we were silly for a while?
Fantastic.
Well, if you would like to see the Fabelmans, please try to go as soon as possible. It's in theaters, but we'll probably get sucked out soon. If not,
I have one last thing to say because Andrew started this by saying like Spielberg is like the architect of like a certain kind of blockbuster, and that's certainly true. But I kind of think like one of the interesting things about Spielberg right now is that moment is kind of past. Like the movies don't really feel like that they're influenced by Spielberg anymore. And in fact, like the last few Spielberg movies have kind of underperformed at the box office. Like Fabelmans isn't doing amazing money. West Side Story was kind of a flop.
Well, I think the definition of what a blockbuster should look like to a modern audience has shifted. And he's
exactly, which I think is interesting because now he's like sitting here like almost like Chaplin at the end of his career or something like that, where like the specific like set of skills and like affects that he cultivated and like shaped the industry around that. That the moment of that is passing him by, and like his films are becoming increasingly insular, even when they're not intended to be so. Like West Side Story. Like every frame of that movie is meant to be like, dang it, I want the full movie house like cheering along with this movie. But it kind of didn't. Good. It's good. Like
super good.
This isn't like a downgrading the quality of the movies that he's making, but like the ways in which he used to be able to attract audiences, like people freaking came out to Always, or like Color Purple, or like movies that are really flawed early in his career. But like he's making these like really competent, well-made movies that in another era would have been like, or Amistad or something like that. Like in another era,
the problem is that the movies do not have Spider-Man in them, and because the movies don't have Spider-Man in them, I do not want to see them.
Yeah.
Well, right. I mean, this is like I'm not saying that like this is the same thing, but like every artist or every director, every person who stays in an industry long enough will find that industry change out from under them.
For sure.
All like that shift where like a bunch of the old like musical people are all of a sudden like out of work or whatever because the studio musical ceases to exist in the way that it did at one point.
Right.
I don't know. It's just kind of
if you remember, in Bridge of Spies, like the prisoner that they trade is Spider-Man.
Like, I never saw Bridge of Spies. I would really like to watch it.
It's super good. And the prisoner, it's like he just like comes out of there and everybody's like, ah, and he's like, pew, 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 pew.
And then it's two Spider-Mans looking at each other.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fantastic.
One's the communist Spider-Man and one's the capitalist Spider-Man.
Oh man,
it's a real.
I want to see the communist Spider-Man.
He's fun. Well, Fabelmans, it's in theaters now. It's distributed by Universal, so I would assume it'll be on. They usually been putting their stuff on Peacock, which is Universal, so it'll be streaming if you miss it in the theater. But go see it in the theater. It's worth. It's one of those big screen movies, y'all.
You should see it on a big screen.
Yeah.
That's good.
Moving on to a small screen movie, I guess, because it's only on Netflix.
It made a short theatrical run.
Oh, okay.
But
that
not
is
for most people.
That is Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. This is what I believe has been a passion project for Guillermo del Toro. Has been one he's been wanting to make forever. It's his first stop motion movie, correct?
It is.
Yeah, first animated in general, I believe.
Yeah, which seems like a very natural coming together. But this one, it is the story of Pinocchio. This one is told in the shadow of the rise of fascism and Benito Mussolini in Italy.
That is so funny to me, man. Like just hearing it's Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. We took Pinocchio and set it during the rise of fascism.
Well, it's just like, yeah, I mean, like he's got to have that in there. This is like a through line through so many of his movies is like he's got to throw fascism in there and just show us how much he hates fascism, which I appreciate.
I do really we need it.
It's Zach and I can talk about this in a minute, I guess, but I feel like there are movies in which that works really well. There are movies in which it feels like a kind of odd fit.
I don't think it works in Shape of Water at all.
No. Michael, what did you make of Pinocchio?
I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. The animation craft is just top notch, and I feel like I should point out this is technically co-directed, and the co-director is the animation guy, Mark Gustafsson.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they credited Anomalisa, Charlie Kaufman, and the stop motion dude he was working with.
Oh, is that the same guy?
No. I'm just talking about the I guess the naming convention of who the movie is by.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to downplay Del Toro's involvement because, everything about the look of this movie screams all of the visual things he's tried to do throughout his career. Like Pinocchio is this weird spindly guy, and there's visibly still twigs on him and stuff. Everything, you can tell Del Toro had a hand in this. I'm not saying that he didn't do anything, but there is technically another director who I imagine did a lot of the technical heavy lifting with the animation. But it looks amazing, and it's really gross and icky looking too, which is perfect for a Pinocchio movie. I feel like I said this on Letterboxd, but I read the book Pinocchio, the Italian book, which is an Italian children's book from the 1880s. I read that when I was a young child, and after having loved the Disney Pinocchio when I was even younger. And that book is bizarre. It is so strange and unsettling and just kind of gross. And this is the first Pinocchio movie I've seen that gets that weird, grimy, folktale feel of Pinocchio really down. It's just got some, for instance, the whale. You got to have him swallowed by the whale at the end, but the whale is so disgusting in this movie.
The whale, it's not even a whale.
Is it a whale? Yeah, I'm not even sure what it is.
It's this weird demented fish thing.
Yeah, but it's very gross, and all the characters, because they're stop motion, and this is not like a stop motion in the sense of everything feels diorama. This is more on the Henry Selick end of things, where things kind of feel ramshackle and intentionally look impossible, and just grotesque looking. Geppetto, he has a beard, and his beard is carved into his face. It's not a separate thing from his face. And so Geppetto himself looks very wooden, and his beard is just this elaborate wood carving down his chest. And I'm trying to think of some of the other characters, but a lot of them are the cricket, for instance, which doesn't, I don't think, get a name in this. Does he get a name in this movie?
It's Sebastian J. Cricket.
Oh god. Voiced by Ewan McGregor, by the way. He's he kind of looks like he stepped off of James and the Giant Peach. It's that level of bug craft. And I just loved all of that stuff. It's just so perfect for the kind of story that Pinocchio is.
the wood spirit and death, the Tilda Swinton,
Yeah,
the characters
yeah,
Tilda Swinton voiced, they looked fantastic. They kind of reminded me of Kubo and the Two Strings, the Leica movie, just in
yeah.
terms of like these kind of celestial wooden figures.
Yeah, kind of the fun thing I had not seen in a Pinocchio movie before. I don't think it's in the original story, but like Pinocchio is he's doing a whole like what's the Tom Cruise movie where you can die a bunch of times?
Edge of Tomorrow.
Edge
Or
of
is it
Tomorrow. He's
Live,
got
Die,
the Edge of
Repeat?
Tomorrow thing where
Yeah.
because Pinocchio is his spirit is not tied to like a corporeal thing, like he gets to like reanimate the puppet all these different times because he'll just die and then get booted out to like the nether world where this death spirit is there,
And all
then
these
he sets a little
and all these rabbits are playing cards with each other. That's fun too.
yeah, and they become pallbearers too, and a spirit goes
All
goes
voiced by Tim Blake Nelson, which I thought was a fun
Oh,
thing.
good.
The voice cast. Let's talk about the voice cast real quick because it is insane.
It is, yeah.
So like you,
Let me look. So yeah, you got Ewan McGregor as the cricket, David Bradley as Geppetto. Don't know who
Christoph Waltz is
Christoph Waltz, the
like
bad
a
guy.
puppet master.
Yeah, Tilda Swinton plays these two, like the wood sprite and the death spirit. Ron
Perlman plays a
plays
fascist
yeah,
like general guy.
yeah, you get Kate Blanchett, who's just a monkey.
Also,
No
you're
spoken
talking about
line.
SpongeBob.
Yeah, then Tom Kenny is Mussolini.
Yes, Mussolini shows up for just like a handful of lines.
And
But
it's almost like
anyway,
Tom Kenny doing like a really bad offensive Italian accent. He's just kind of like, "What are these puppets are doing over here?"
yeah, no one gets the like Super Mario Brothers Italian accent except Benito Mussolini, which is
They
amazing.
should have had Tom Kenny play Mario in this Mario movie instead of
For
Chris
real.
Pratt.
Dude,
Like,
that's a great idea.
Yeah. Anyway.
But anyway, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, like they have Pinocchio die a bunch of times in this movie, and he keeps reanimating the puppet because that's what he's allowed to do because of some magical rules. I don't really get it, but that also makes this movie like surprisingly like macabre because like Pinocchio will get his legs burned off, and then he'll just like reanimate this puppet again. And they
He gets
build him new
shot
legs.
at one point.
Yeah, he gets shot. He gets freaking like doesn't he drown or something? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't. By the end, like it's this weird like moving thing because the entire movie, like all Pinocchio stories, is Pinocchio's quest to be a real boy. It's less Pinocchio's quest in this movie and more Geppetto's quest because Geppetto's son dies in World War One because of this like fluke bombing that happens in a church. There's a bunch of religious imagery in this movie too. And so Geppetto like becomes this like crazed with grief, and that's when he builds the puppet because he wants another son. And then like he manages to summon Tilda Swinton's magical creature, and she turns the puppet alive, but the puppet's not a real boy until the end of the movie when like he's granted mortality. Like he's no longer immortal, but he is granted mortality, and that's what makes him a real boy. And like it's kind of this moving like closing the circuit on like Geppetto's grief thing where like the humanity of Geppetto's son is like most thoroughly exhibited by the fact that Geppetto's son has died. And like Pinocchio as a boy, like a puppet has to come to grips with that. And like, I don't know, like I found that like weird, like oddly moving for a movie that's not particularly moving the whole time.
I know, as somebody who, like I mentioned off mic, like I wasn't super. There are moments like you're describing in the script that are pretty good. I think a lot of some of the stuff just kind of gets silly because it just kind of starts turning its wheels and really doesn't have much to say. Honestly, a lot of the fascism stuff doesn't, at least in my opinion,
It's a weird
really go
fit.
anywhere. It doesn't really go anywhere.
I do like that all the ways that Pinocchio is naughty, because like the usual tension of Pinocchio's story is he's supposed to do one thing, but he's being tempted to do another thing. All of his temptations are putting him closer in proximity to the fascism,
True,
which I think that's the part that works. The rest of it doesn't really, including the Mussolini scene, unfortunately.
Yeah. But no, I think the ending works real well. I think the ending's pretty effective. And that kind of got me. I think I gotta watch this again. I just wasn't really landing with it. I mean, I agree with you in terms of the craft. It's insane. It's incredible. Just watching the pieces, but we haven't mentioned it yet, but there are a lot of musical numbers in this, and they're
Complete
Oh, I
not.
forgot it was a
airball
musical.
on the musical numbers.
Yeah,
Like
they're not
none
Are
of
they
good.
them
bad?
worked for me.
They're
Is
not
it
good.
is it just the songs are bad?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh man,
they're
that's
just
such a
not
bummer.
good tunes.
GDT, you got a lot of skills. I don't think writing songs is one of them.
How many
Did he
songs
write
are
the
in
music?
the original
I don't
Pinocchio?
know.
I know When You Wish Upon a Star is in there. Are there other songs?
Yeah, there's
They
a
didn't,
handful of songs in
they
the
didn't even sing "Wish
Disney
Upon a
one.
Star." I think is that in Pinocchio or is that just in Disney's
No,
Pinocchio?
that
I'm
comes from
asking about-
Pinocchio.
Oh, okay.
Jiminy Cricket sings it at the
Yeah.
beginning.
Speaking
No.
of Disney's Pinocchio, though, I think it is a baller move that Del Toro's Pinocchio came out the same year as the shitty Disney live action Pinocchio.
I
It
feel
is
like it's like a happy coincidence driven by Disney being shitty because like
Yeah.
surely this movie was in production before the live action remake
Oh,
Pinocchio.
for sure. Yeah.
Just because of how long you have to take on stop motion and stuff. And apparently Del Toro's been gestating this movie for a long time.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the live action remake, but like I can't imagine it being anything but like the polar opposite of what this is.
Yeah, it's well at one point something shits in the street and Pinocchio touches the shit. So, it's real height of entertainment,
I can imagine that happening in Del Toro's Pinocchio, though. To be honest,
Wait, did you see the live action Pinocchio, Zach?
No, somebody just
Oh.
said, "Look at this clip of Pinocchio grabbing shit in the Disney movie," and put it on like Twitter or Instagram or something. No, it's I don't know. I think it's worth watching. I mean,
I would like to see it.
I don't like giving Netflix credit for anything really because they're a stupid, company. But we'll give them props this year for putting out both
another
this
fucking
and
animated movie that's interesting.
well,
Yeah.
between this and Wendell and Wild, like really, really intricate stop motion
The
movies
house
that
too.
are-
The house was stop
in the
motion.
house. Yeah,
I feel like there were others that people liked as well. I've not
So,
kept
like,
up with them.
yeah. So
They're
like,
all
shout out.
flawed, but like Netflix is like
Well-
consistently putting out interesting animated movies.
Oh, there
Well, the
was
other ones that I've
Klaus
seen is,
last year. People liked that.
Which one?
Klaus.
I think it's a few years
Yeah,
ago.
and this year there was the one I've seen a lot of people talking about the Sea Beast.
Oh, that
supposed-
was the thing I was
Yeah.
thinking of.
I
Yeah.
haven't seen that, but they put out the new Cartoon Saloon movie.
Yeah.
Oh, is that on
there
Netflix?
was,
Mhm.
yeah, it's on Netflix.
Is it good?
It's good, not great.
Oh man.
So I mean, like I at least on that front, I'll give it to him that there's not what other distribution company is going to be putting out a Henry Selick movie and a Guillermo del Toro stop motion animated movie. So
yeah.
I hope it's well watched, so they'll continue to do it.
Yeah, go watch it, Andrew. You might tip the scales.
I would like to see it. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're going to walk around a small southern town and try to help people after this.
Okay. I will be right back. Don't.
Get ready for this note sheet where the mayor of Selma talks about why they wanted this production to come in town.
Oh gosh, is this
'Cause I
the
guess-
same
I
mayor
guess-
that was mayor during like the marches and everything? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Well, this is 68. It's only 3 years removed.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I
The
guess they
racial
were.
politics of this movie are, I don't know how to parse them.
Yeah, I guess they were gonna film. They were gonna film in Georgia and Atlanta and Savannah and Columbus, where the author's from. But then they shifted it to Alabama because it was cheaper. And
Wait, so this is Selma? Like that's what we're seeing on screen?
I don't think it's supposed to be. I mean, I don't know.
But I mean, like that's where it was filmed. is what
Yeah,
you're saying.
it's filmed in Selma a couple years
wow.
after the Bloody Sunday, which is just
How
such a
about that?
weird, like what a weird factoid. But like I
Yeah.
found that and I was like, what? That's a strange.
I think this
It's a
movie's got to be
strange
full of weird factoids like that.
I don't know. What was I going to ask? Oh, speaking of fun movie to watch. I watched it. It's like what is it? 10 minute short animated film called My Fat Arse and I. And
Okay.
it's like the story. It's like this film about this woman dealing with anorexia, and it's a trip. It's like this Polish animated. It reminds me of kind of something like The Son of the White Mare, where it's just like this deep, surreal animation. And it was wild. I watched it when
It's on Mubi.
it's on movie. I watched it. So whenever you're on there watching Decision to Leave, let me know, and you should
Yeah,
watch
yeah.
My
I'll
Fat
check it
Arse and
out.
I, because it's just like she's like really big, and then she's like, I need to lose weight. So then she loses weight, but then she becomes like too skinny, and then she gets invited by all these like legs with asses that have eyeballs and shit to go to skitty like skinny landia or something like that, whatever it's called. And then they're like going through this like test to see if they're skinny, and then when she goes, she fails, and then it like triggers this fight, and then this other big woman comes and like helps her fight the like leader of Skinny Landia or whatever. It's just like you're like, what the hell is happening? But
Oh,
it's
wow.
really fun and very like colorful and strange.
Yeah. Nice.
No, I found a bunch of I found a bunch of stuff on Movie that I earmarked to watch.
Yeah, Mubi's cool. Like it's a cool.
They added The Son of the White Mare. I might have to rewatch that. Ooh.
Yeah, I remember when I had Mubi, like half of them are like movies I've never heard of, and the other half are like, oh wow, this is randomly on here. Like I remember like when I had it, Southland Tales like cycled through.
Through what?
We were just talking about Mubi and
Oh,
how
yeah.
like that kind of like lottery of like every day there's a different movie, and sometimes it's just
I
something like
found
really obscure and.
the thing that got me excited. They have like all these like late period Satyajit Ray movies from like the 80s and early 90s, and I'm like,
Oh really?
yeah.
I didn't know he was making movies that late.
So I was just like, I didn't realize that either. But no, I was just on it, Andrew, and I saw The Son of the White Mare is on it, and I'm like, fuck, I might watch that again.
I have it on Blu-ray now.
I need to get the Blu-ray.
Oh wow,
So
that's
good.
Cool.
Rewatch of Decision to Leave was awesome. I love that movie so much.
It's really good.
But the part I was laughing at that I found to be one of the funniest on this rewatch was when they meet to like they're doing the interrogation and they like order the dinner and they get this like sushi meal.
Oh
or
my
sushi
god,
dish thing.
the food jokes were so funny.
And then his partner comes in and he's like, "Is that the premium dinner meal?"
And then the second time he arrests her, he gets her a corn dog.
Yeah. But he's just like he sees the and he like names the restaurant. He's like, "Is that the restaurant premium dinner meal?" And she's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Is that did you pay? Did we pay for that?" he's like physically like angry that they're eating this incredible meal. I'm like, I love it.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Is it possible to watch White Noise? Maybe like. Did we already talk about this? The half day next Wednesday?
I think that's possible. I do have a question about whether or not that will actually be a half day though, because it's only marked as a half day for students on the calendar.
So the way that it is, I have always experienced that day, and including at Carter, I think, was we come to school in the morning, like just staff, and then like at noon, principals basically get an email from the superintendent saying like, "Have a great holiday."
Okay,
and
I have experienced it that way as well, but I could never remember if it was when I was looking at the calendar this year and I was like, "This doesn't say half day." Am I just anyway? Yes, I think that would be a good idea.
It's playing 12:30 that day, or we could go at 3:50 if you don't get out that early.
Downtown West.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the reviews seem really polarized on it.
To see Avatar: The Way of the Water?
I probably will eventually.
I'm gonna pass probably.
I need to rewatch Avatar though. Here's the thing.
I'm gonna rewatch. I haven't seen Avatar since it came out, so I was gonna rewatch it.
I saw Avatar on a TV. Like I didn't see Avatar in a theater. I knew
Oh,
immediately
seriously?
that was a mistake. And so if I'm gonna see Shape of Water, Way of Water, I know it's got to be in the theater. I'm not gonna make the same mistake.
Oh no, I'm gonna go. They got this theater here that like has this like obnoxiously large IMAX screen, and I'm like,
That's
let's
how
do it.
James Cameron surely intends for it to be seen.
But no, they have. I was gonna rewatch Avatar because I haven't watched it since it came out. So-
I
haven't
remember
either.
really
I
not
remember
liking it.
Unobtainium.
Yeah.
Hmm?
I remember Unobtainium, which is just an amazing proper noun to have in a movie.
Really.
But I'm not gonna go see it this week. I'll probably wait a couple weeks.
Yeah, I will also not see it this week.
I'm very curious to see how the box office for that shakes out.
Yeah, because everything else is already in production. Like, if it tanks, they've got like 4 more of these to just...
Man, I've been laughing at the ongoing meme, like until this movie has actually come out, of like, oh yeah, James Cameron's Avatar is coming out in 5 years. He's already
Oh,
got
yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planned. Like that has just been like a hilarious impossibility until this moment.
It was like that for so long, though. It's like
Yeah.
all 3 are gonna come out in a year, and you're like, what are you talking about?
Wait, have they already shot the others?
I think at least one's in post-production because it's supposed to be next
Yeah.
year that it comes out.
Damn.
Yeah, because they were filming them in his like little secret bunker studio.
They should have done that with Dune.
Did
I
you
wanna
ever
see
hear?
the second Dune?
Did you ever hear the story that Rob Lowe told about how he learned about 9/11? And
No.
so Rob Lowe, Bill Paxton, and James Cameron on 9/11 2001 went down to the Titanic were like literally like hung out on the bow of the Titanic, and
Like
we're
the
like down
set
there.
that for the film?
No, like the legit actual
Oh, like
Titanic,
down in the
like
submersible,
the
like...
crash of the Titanic.
Oh my
Yeah.
And we're
god.
down there. 9/11 happens, and they come up, and they're just like, "What's up, everybody? That was cool." And then they tell them what happened. Like, can you imagine? Like you think of it like as us like watching it on television, but imagine going to the crash of the Titanic
with James Cameron.
with James Cameron. 9/11 takes
director
place.
of one noted film, Titanic.
It happens, and then you come back up and are like, "Oh, guess what just happened?" That's incredible.
This
Oh my
celebrity
gosh.
story reminds me that I was browsing YouTube the other day, and YouTube's algorithm, in its wisdom, pointed me towards a video of Steven Spielberg telling the John Ford story from
yeah.
like, I think it was at the latest the 2000s.
He's
Might
been
have been
telling
the
that story
90s.
for a while.
Yeah, but it is like word for word what happens in the movie.
Yeah. If you want a really funny Steven Spielberg interview, you should watch Martin Short as Jiminy Glick interviewing Spielberg. It's kind of cute because Spielberg finds it very entertaining.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, it's a good little interview. He's like, "Steven, you're getting so close. You're gonna make it one day."
One more thing on that David Lynch scene. That scene has 2 pleasant surprise reveals, at least for me, because I didn't know it was going to happen. The first is when you realize he's in John Ford's office, and then you're all excited about that. And then the second is, wait, is that David Lynch? Like, that's just an amazing 1-2 punch right there.
And then the script is amazing too. Like, just hearing what he says is so good.
It's incredibly good. I would not have...
Get the fuck out of my office.
Zach, I think I told Andrew this, but I was reading in an interview with Tony Kushner that nobody thought that they could get David Lynch to do that role. And so they asked Laura Dern to ask him to do it. Apparently that's how they got it.
No, they need to put that online just so I can watch it once a day.
Yeah, I strongly agree.
Let the secret out.
Ugh. Yeah, I was like that's the only fanboy moment I had is when he's panning across the room and there's just all the Ford posters. And I'm like, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, that's awesome. It also made me want to rewatch Liberty Valance, which
Yeah,
I've
I had
never
not seen
seen
that movie
Liberty
since I was a
Valance.
kid.
let me see. Before we start, I'm gonna see if it's on.
Feels
Should
like an
be a
HBO
young.
Max movie.
It doesn't say so.
I don't think
Oh,
it's on HBO Max. I was just looking through their classics.
well, that should be a Young Critic movie.
Should. Surprised we haven't done it.
We could just have like another John Ford
It
movie
turned
every
60.
year.
Turned 60 this year.
Happy birthday.
All right. Let's talk about how our heart is a lonely hunter. Whatever the fuck that means.
Bad title. It's a Shakespeare quote, right? It's from Twelfth Night. Andrew, help me
No,
out
it's
here.
from a poem.
Is it a poem? Okay, never
Yeah.
mind.
Okay. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. And we're back with part 2 of episode 343 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be doing our Patreon pick series with 1968's The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, directed by Robert Ellis Miller from a script by Thomas C. Ryan. Film stars Alan Arkin, Sandra Locke, Stacy Keach, Percy Rodriguez, and Cicely Tyson. In this adaptation of the Carson McCullers novel, John Singer, who is deaf and mute, tries to help the people around him. He rents a bedroom in a small southern town to be closer to his friend Spiros, who is also deaf. John attempts to strike up a friendship with Mick, the teenage daughter of his disabled landlord, and meets the town drunk. Later, he helps Dr. Copeland confront his failing health. 1950, documentary producers William and Helen Levitt, Sidney Myers, and Giannis Loeb were embarking on their first 35mm theatrical feature, an adaptation of the McCullers novel, a critically acclaimed best-selling book in 1940. The four were, quote, currently dickering for outside financing, end quote, for what they estimated to be $200,000 for the film. 11 years later, stage director Jose Quintero hoped to shoot The Heart is a Lonely Hunter as a low-budget independent film from a script by British screenwriter Gavin Lambert. Quintero wanted to film in the South and expressed interest in hiring actors Paul Schofield, Zero Mostel, and Montgomery Clift. 2 years later, the New York Times reported that producer David Susskind had taken over the project but had a new screenplay by Thomas C. Ryan. Susskind planned to shoot the film in New York City with director Sidney Lumet and said that Zero Mostel and Montgomery Clift were still interested, as was Peter Falk, who flew to New York to discuss one of the roles with Lumet. Clift, as John Singer, was the linchpin of the production, but because of his erratic behavior and bad health, no insurance company would cover him. Several months later, independent producer Eli Landau optioned the project as part of a 3-picture deal with Sidney Lumet, and shooting was initially set to begin in New York City on September 16, 1963. Warren Beatty was tentatively set to star, but the project was held up indefinitely, and nothing came of those. 4 years later, the February 8, 1967 issue of Variety announced that television producer Mark Merson's Brownstone Productions had taken over the film rights to The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, with the intention of shooting Thomas C. Ryan's original script, with Ryan co-producing. Filming would begin in Georgia in September 1967, and New York stage actor Alan Arkin, who was suddenly hot because of his comic role in the popular The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, was set to play John Singer. Ryan told the New York Times he wrote the screenplay 5 years earlier, but, quote, deeply believed in the novel long before that. McCullers' story, quote, is a thing of beauty and truth, and we hope to capture this in the film, he said. Alan Arkin was also an admirer of the book and, quote, jumped at the chance to play Singer. The company moved the production from Georgia to Selma, Alabama, a town of 28,000 people in turn-of-the-century neighborhoods that had not changed much over the years. Selma was notorious for its Bloody Sunday during the Deep South's voting rights movement in 1965, when county deputies and state troopers attacked African-American marchers with tear gas and clubs. Selma Mayor Joe Smitherman told Variety that his, quote, peaceful, law-abiding community expected no difficulties with the production's, quote, racially mixed cast because everyone was welcome in Selma and would be, quote, treated fairly within the law. He took the opportunity to compare Selma, quote, the safest place to be, with cities in the north where, quote, you all are burning up the place up there. Referring to
He was
several
probably cool because he knew that they wouldn't be voting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever. referring to several recent race riots. Smitherman convinced the Selma Chamber of Commerce to embrace the film production because of its economic benefits. He also stressed that the film would be, quote, a publicity advantage to a town known nationally for its segregationalist violence. Furthermore, the Depression-era story had, quote, nothing to do with a civil rights story as such. Sandra Locke, then known as Sandra Locke, was a 23-year-old WSMTV staff employee when she auditioned for the role of Mick. To seem younger, Locke shaved 6 years off her age, a lie she maintained for the rest of her career. Although she was outed by the Billings Gazette and the Nashville Tennessean, it took decades for syndicated publications to catch on. Spoiler alert, this is a deeply questionable review from the New York Times, but I'm going to read it because I just kind of want it.
I think I've read this. Yeah.
The Heart is a Lonely Hunter is an interesting example of how very difficult it must be for the arts when there is an immense political awareness in the air. So much in Carson McCullers' early novel of Singer, the deaf mute whose silence becomes an expression and a magnet of all the lonely, life-impaired whites and Negroes in a southern town, had to be updated and changed. And still one keeps scrutinizing the movie, almost hostilely, for where it politically stands. It is not just that we know that no Southern Negroes speak quite the way Miss McCullers' Portia, the Beulah Aunt Jemima, talking daughter of a proud Negro doctor, spoke, with all her I were's and they have's and other exaggerated unpoetic failures of speech, by which Miss McCullers signaled in every line just what kind of character Portia was meant to be. The movie solves this problem by casting Portia, played by Cicely Tyson, as a kind, articulate Negro militant who expresses her rebellion by becoming a maid. Not very likely. It is
a militant? What about her is militant?
It is that the required changes, like who cuts up whom and under what circumstances, and sidestepping or accommodating modern sensibilities, cause the plot and motivations to fall apart. At almost every dramatic moment, the story becomes frail in its sense.
So woke Hollywood ruined this good book. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Variety in 1968 said, translating to the screen the delicate, if specious tragedy of Carson McCullers' first novel was clearly not an easy matter, nor an entirely successful one. Either The Heart is a Lonely Hunter emerges as a fragmented episodic melodrama with uneven dramatic impact and formula pacing. So on that note, I had to read the New York Times review because I was just like, whoa. This is a lot. What did
you just can't say anything these days.
No, I was just like, this seems like it has nothing to do with this seems like a you thing. This doesn't have anything to do with the movie. What did y'all make of The Heart is a Lonely Hunter?
Michael, do you want to go or you want me to?
I watched this not really knowing very much about it. I knew that this existed as a book. And I knew who Alan Arkin was. And that was about it. I knew Cicely Tyson was as well. That was about it going into this. And as I watched it, this growing sense as each scene unfolded of just this growing feeling of what am I watching? Just started dawning on me.
I asked myself that question.
I never answered that question by the end of the movie. Yeah. Every scene, that Variety review, I think, describes it fairly well, which is that like it's like a melodrama that's episodic, and so it like is really uneven and doesn't fit together that well. But also like what did they say? The drama was or the tragedy was delicate but specious or something like that. And I also agree with that. Like the tragedy erupts in maybe the final 10 minutes of the movie in what I felt to be like a nonsensical way. Like I couldn't connect the dots. And I don't know if there's like a maybe more naturalistic version of this movie that is just kind of like hanging out with these people who are all kind of like lonely and like are searching for human connection and struggling to find it. And then there's maybe the more like kind of heightened, like full on like melodrama sort of thing where, you know, different, like the structure of society leads people to be alienated and eventually harmed. And those two are like coexisting in the movie, but not given enough development on either end for either mode to really work. And it just, I didn't know what I was supposed to get out of this. And Alan Arkin's character, well, just like the whole movie in general, when it's approach to disability, like I don't really get it. Like, is this just like the mere presence of someone who is like without hearing is enough to like make people question their humanity or something? Like there's like
It
supposed to be something
feels like
profound.
the and like an anti-ableist version of the magical Negro trope or something.
Yeah, like he just comes around and he's like impossibly kind and pure, and everyone else has to like kind of question, like, wow, he's changed me, he's changed my
Yeah.
soul. And I didn't really understand how that was like he's not even that magical. Like
Right.
he doesn't
He
do
does
things that
nothing for
are
these people for the
he
most
doesn't do
part.
anything for them. He simply
Yeah.
exists. He
He
boards
buys
a
a
house.
record for this girl.
He buys a record, he boards at a house, but he doesn't really do anything. He simply is long suffering. Like
It's for the doctor at one point.
He does translate for the doctor.
yeah. I mean, it's not that he doesn't do nice things, but he doesn't do things that are
Yeah.
sufficiently nice that it would disrupt the social fabric of the town.
No, I completely agree. Yeah. Like it doesn't feel like this character even really has a story. He just kind of is in these scenes with all of these other characters who aren't particularly connected to each other.
Which is maybe like on paper interesting because like a lot of the characters talk about him like he's not there, or will like turn their heads away from him so he can't read his lips or whatever. So he's like functionally an observer in his own life to a certain extent because people act like
he doesn't have, as the kids say, main character energy.
Well, no, and that's kind of like a function of how society treats his disability. And like I can see like there's maybe a interesting thing like potentially out of it, and maybe the book does something interesting with it, but as a character himself, he's not present enough to make me feel anything other than he is not the main character.
Man, yeah. So the person who suggested we do this movie said that the book should be taught To Kill a Mockingbird, and we have a whole episode way back where we talk about To Kill a Mockingbird a lot. The movie is Did You Wonder Who Fired the Gun? I think is what that movie is called. I have talked way too long in this podcast about To Kill a Mockingbird already, but long story short, there are things that are good about To Kill a Mockingbird, and there are things that are bad about To Kill a Mockingbird. One of the things that is good about it that I could imagine being good about this book is the sort of fragmented, small town, like non-story storytelling. Where in that book, in To Kill a Mockingbird, we're like getting these snippets of memories from this kid's life. And it's like this very authentic lived-in experience of like what it's like to live in this small southern town, right? I could see a version of that here, and maybe the book is that. I'm not sure. But the movie just felt so much like a bad soap opera to me. Like it never really felt particularly lived in because all these characters feel like such flat like ideas, I guess. And the ideas are so strange, like a rebellious girl who is rebellious because she's into classical music, or a reverse racist black doctor who refuses to treat white patients. Like when I get to the scene where it's introducing me to the reverse racist doctor, that's when I ask myself the question that Michael's asking: what am I watching right now? Like I understand why Selma didn't find this movie threatening, because they were happy it didn't include any sort of civil rights struggle, because it does not include any sort of civil rights struggle, but it kind of like almost looks like or gestures as though it is doing that.
It's like a Chappelle Show sketch or something.
It's like a Chappelle Show sketch.
Well, but like even that, like there's maybe like in theory something interesting that could have been drawn out of that. Like perhaps like the society is so like such like a society that has apartheid to such an extent that like the white or the black doctor knows that like any complicity with like white people is going to be bad for like the the Black community, and so he refused. Like if it were something like that, if he were truly like a militant or like a Black nationalist or that sort of thing that was like actually in conversation with like
That would be
the
interesting.
things that were going on, that would be
Yeah.
interesting, and that could be in the movie if you added some scenes or something like that. But it's simply not there.
But this is a
All
fake
it
person
is.
who doesn't exist. Like a
Right.
white writer made this person up.
Yeah. Well, I know this white person who won't treat Black people, so there's probably some Black people who do that too.
And I feel like the depiction of disability is probably along the same lines. I mean, I guess I don't know that much about people who have this condition, so I can't say that like there's nothing that is relatable about this. But it felt very alienating and distancing from those characters to me. I had the epiphany while watching it that like it's kind of wild that we don't just as a rule always subtitle sign language. Like to not know what people who are speaking sign language to each other are saying is to kind of like suggest that they don't have real language. Like they're not actually communicating with each other in the same way that, you know, two characters speaking a foreign language are. And I don't feel like I get a sense of either of these guys' characters because I don't know the words they're exchanging with one another. Like I'm having to kind of guess, and they're not like, because ASL is what it is, like it is not something that you can just guess most of the time, right? Like it is a complicated, unique language. And so neither of these characters, like that we meet at the beginning, feel like they're being painted with any humanity to me, really, especially the friend, who it felt like it was almost, I don't know, mocking a little bit.
The friend, like, out of all of the characters, the friend gets like zero agency. You know, you get the scene with him breaking into the bakery at the beginning. That's kind of the catalyst to where they get to the situation, you know, the whole town where they moved and all that kind of stuff. But after that, once they've moved, the friend's like deeply sidelined, other than like maybe 2 scenes.
You forget that the movie is about that, or that the movie presented itself as being about that before it just kind of shifted to something else. This is another reason I felt like it's a bad soap opera. Like it just kind of keeps switching plot lines. It is spinning so many plates that you forget which plates you started spinning.
Right.
And not in like a, you know, cool interconnected mosaic of life sort of way. It's just like, oh yeah, that plot line. I guess we're back here.
Yeah, it's not like they connect very well. You know, even at the very end, the doctor and the teenager like kind of connect for a second. It's more just like, he was cool, huh? And they were like, yeah, all right, see ya.
And so like once I got to about the 75% mark of this movie, I was watching it with somebody and they asked, how are they going to finish this movie? Like, how is this movie possibly going to wrap up? And the answer is out of nowhere, the main character committed suicide.
And his friend has died as well, which I will say that like I had a little bit of a different reaction at the beginning of the movie, because a lot of the beginning of the movie, like a good portion of like before the friend is committed, is that kind of unsubtitled sign language. And for a minute, maybe like the first 10 minutes of the movie or something, I thought I was watching a movie that was going to be much bolder and more interesting than it ended up being, because of how little it holds your hand through a lot of that stuff. Like there's no dialogue for maybe 5 minutes of this movie. And not like no spoken dialogue, but even before that, a lot of it is like, you're just seeing this guy break into this bakery, and like it kind of just throws you into it. I ended up having to watch this on YouTube because the library DVD I got was broken. And when I first started it, I was wondering, like, is this actually the beginning of the movie? Because I wasn't sure if like there had been just some sort of like cheap upload to YouTube or something like that.
No, it does just start.
It does just start. Yeah. And like, for a second, like I was looking at like, okay, 1968, is this some kind of like bold, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest sort of thing, where they're going to like do this kind of like social parable, but also like have this kind of like New Hollywood, like foreign film inflected like style to it? And the answer is no. But like for a minute I was like, maybe this is like trying to do something interesting, because it is like a striking and bold decision to, for a movie that otherwise is not very high-minded, to
Yeah.
open with such like such deep in media res, like such deep, like, we're not going to give you exposition about these characters in a conventional way. I don't know. It was a
There's
very weird way
also
to open the movie.
there's a very strange like superimposition shot at the beginning where we get this close up on Mr. Singer's eyes, um, cast over the skyline of this town.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie never is working in that sort of cinematic mode again, nor does that shot seem to mean anything cinematically. Like this, I don't feel like that we are really like probing the heart of this town in this movie. Um, Nor am I like getting that much of this character's interiority throughout. It just
Yeah.
kind of settles into this like very boring to look at, like beige televisual movie.
Yeah, it is very boring on a stylistic level, except for like a handful of those like little flourishes. I don't know. I didn't. This movie wasn't like offensive to me, but I could not find a single thing to enjoy about it. To be honest, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just kind of dull. And like
Yeah,
doesn't really have that much to say about the issues that it is touching. Um,
I am
and-
curious if, I mean, this novel was a bestseller, and I mean, surely not everyone who saw the movie read the novel, because that's not how those things work. But like, I am curious if like having read the novel maybe gives more insight into at least what the movie was going for. Because as it is, like, I'm not sure what the movie was going for in terms of theme, in
Mhm.
terms of like how we're supposed to be connected to these characters. But if I knew like a fuller version of the story, and I could kind of like view this in the same way that like people watch the Harry Potter movies, which are not really complete stories, but are like reasonable, like kind of approximations of the story beats of the book that you might be
Mhm.
used to, like, I wonder if the movie even at all works on that level. I'm not sure because I've not read it.
Yeah, I wish I had read it, but
I kind
I,
of want to, even
I,
though it's
I
supposed to be good.
yeah, I feel like they probably could have expanded on some of, it just like we're talking about, it just is so feels so like half baked in a lot of these storylines, a lot of these moments that I'm just kind of like, um, what's like it doesn't really lead to much, and I'm wondering if in the format of a book where you're able to like really carve out more time to really kind of get into the relationships and what he's bringing to them and things like that. I wonder if that makes it a much more fulfilling experience than this, which, yeah, it just feels like he kind of has these moments with some folks, and then literally out of nowhere
He
for the last
freaking
10
dies.
minutes he just kills himself.
Can we talk about the ending of the movie? Because like there's like an element where I'm not sure what dots I'm supposed to be connecting there. Um, so like, are we ever given a reason for why his friend dies? Like, or is it just like, oh, he was in an institution, he probably wasn't doing too well, he died? Like, does the movie ever like?
I don't remember. I mean, I'm trying to think. I don't remember ever there have been a moment, especially like when he's dying, like them going, "This is what he's dying from." I think
Yeah,
it's
because
just
it just is so like
it's
the
literally like
tragedy.
it's literally a cut from the nurse goes, "The doctor should you need to talk to the doctor," to him in the graveyard, and you're just like,
Yeah, and
"What?"
then from there, it's like like one of the next scenes is like you just hear a gunshot going off, and then there's
I
this
think it's the
scene from
next
there.
scene.
Well, but then there's also another thing where I wasn't quite sure if I missed something or if I was supposed to be connecting dots. Like, what happens with the girl, like the daughter? Like, she has sex,
She has sex. I think
and
that's
she's
it.
just bummed about that. Like,
I thought for sure it was going to end with her getting pregnant or something, and
right?
it
Yeah, I
being.
kept waiting for something like that.
But
Is
she
she
doesn't
just
really have a conclusion to her arc.
loss of innocence or whatever? Is that what
Yeah.
we're supposed
Well,
to be getting
then
from it?
we haven't even mentioned this. What's the deal with the dad in the wheelchair?
That too.
Yeah,
That
that
too.
it seems to
Like
be
it
seeding
seems
that like
important.
the
It seems
dad.
important, but they never talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a moment where the girl is just like being really hateful about Mr. Singer. And she uses the word cripple, and the dad slaps her. And it seems like there's going to be an arc there where like she has these, misguided ideas about people with disabilities, and her dad recently got a disability and he's going to like open her eyes or whatever. But like there's nothing. It's just not in there.
There's just like, they have kind of, the mom has a speech about like just the financials, like because he can't work in like the job he was doing, like they're not making as much money. And
the mom's speech is about life's a bitch and then you die, especially if you're a girl.
And you're just like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just
is
felt
that
like,
what the movie is saying? Life's a bitch and then you die.
But sometimes you meet some real cool people.
To be honest, that's what
friends
Pinocchio
we made along
is
the
about.
way.
Yeah, but Pinocchio has freaking like whales and stuff. Like,
yeah.
Pinocchio is cool. Like, if this movie had a talking cricket, and if this movie had like puppets that reanimated after they died, and if this movie had a whale that swallowed you and then like you had to escape from it, like I wouldn't really care as much about like, do the plot points make sense? In the same way that like Pinocchio, the Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio doesn't like 100% hang together on a script level, but I kind of don't care because it's like, oh, this is kind of interesting inherently, like all this weird stuff. But this is not interesting inherently. Nothing about this material made me like kind of sit up and be like, oh, this doesn't make sense, but I'm interested in it. I was mostly like, this doesn't make sense, but I don't care because I was kind of bored.
Well, then you have like the whole altercation between Cecily Tyson's husband and her and the white people at the fair that also leads to the Stacy Keach character getting fired and like,
oh my gosh, that escalated so much.
Yeah,
like we get all of a sudden the husband's leg has been chopped off.
Yeah.
He gets gangrene in his leg.
Yeah.
There's like 2 scenes where we get developments on this story, and one is he gets in this knife fight and goes to prison, and then
one of the few like striking shots in the movie is the guy with the knife like at the camera.
Yeah.
Jeez,
wild.
It's just like a lot of stuff that you're like, why? Why? Is it gonna lead to something? No.
I mean, you could also imagine, like To Kill a Mockingbird, you could also imagine that having a larger story about the ways in which the criminal justice system is rigged against African Americans.
Sure.
But you don't even get those scenes really. They're not in the movie.
No, he just gets his leg chopped off.
And like the dad or her dad says he's going to do a protest or something, and he just goes to the office and sits there the whole day and then goes home. And I thought that was going to lead to something, and it still doesn't.
It doesn't.
You could see that being a making a point too about the ways in which like there are just like no avenues towards change for somebody in that situation institutionally. But again, the movie doesn't really make that point. It's you just kind of see these like half-written scenes.
Yeah, I think it's worth like circling back around to that New York Times review that was like, this movie is too PC or something like that. And like the wild thing is this was 1968, like the height of like kind of countercultural uprising along the lines of like race and class and like all that sort of stuff. And you're telling me that like this movie was too embroiled in its own politics to like make an interesting statement like when that was going on in the culture? Like that can't be the case. Like this was like probably like until maybe the last few years with like Black Lives Matter and stuff, like 1968 is like the height of like racial consciousness in like as a mainstream movement in America.
This is when like Night of the Living Dead came out, In the Heat of the Night came out.
Yeah, I mean this is like when
came out.
And like even just like more broadly, just like politically, like this is like the like culmination of like a kind of black radicalism, right? Like so like Black Panthers and like all the like riots and uprisings like Detroit and like Watts and stuff are like have happened or are currently happening. Like there's no way that someone who is interested in saying something about these issues couldn't find something to say about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I just realized there's also like at the beginning of the movie, the friend of the Alan Arkin character breaks into this bakery, gets arrested, and like they like gets out. I mean, they send him to an institution afterwards, but he gets out.
Mhm.
And then the husband of Cicely Tyson gets arrested. He doesn't get out. He gets his leg chopped off. And we don't see him again.
We do see him again.
Do we see him again?
We see him in the barbershop.
Okay.
That's a real weird scene too. I don't
Every
know if I
scene
even
is a
remember
weird
what
scene,
was
but it's
going
not
on
an
there.
interesting weird scene.
I don't have a good memory of like how they all fit together because it is like we're just so rapidly shifting from plot line to plot line. It feels nonsensical in my memory.
Yeah. I don't remember what happened, a lot of it. I just remember like the pieces and then like that guy, like he's drunk and
Oh,
Alan
that
Arkin.
whole character. They
Yeah.
like introduce what seems to be a central character like 30 minutes or so into the movie.
He's gonna be
And then
his
30
first
minutes
friend.
or so later, he's out. He just leaves.
He's like, I'll go
Also,
get another
like,
job.
There's the amazing line where he's just like, "Oh, you're deaf? I thought you were just a good listener," or something
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh.
Like, geez, like there's like something clumsy happening about like social outcasts like finding each other or something, but then they drop it. Like again, like they don't
Right.
do anything with it.
I was laughing really hard about his whole storyline because it reminded me of the storyline in Bob's Burgers when the guy is like an ex-convict and then he gets a job and goes straight by working at the Wonder Wharf at the
Yeah.
Ferris wheel. And I'm like, it's like the same thing. It's like,
Exactly.
It's like Mickey in Bob's Burgers.
Except
Unfortunately,
in Bob's Burgers,
Mickey.
like the fair workers are all like in a gang or something like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, Bob's Burgers, Mickey's played by Bill Hader, and it's way more entertaining.
Yeah. Bill Hader, where were you in 1968?
What do you guys think of Alan Arkin's performance in this?
I don't think it's bad. I
He's fine.
also don't think it doesn't give the character as much interiority as it needs to fully flesh him out into something that, you know, we've talked about. Like, this character doesn't really feel like it's all there. Like, the
Right.
writing is not giving him that. And I don't know that it's Alan Arkin's fault that he can't like conjure a character out of nothing.
Yeah, I mean,
But
he
he
has so
can't.
little to do. And
can't.
I wonder
Yeah.
also if the script is like telling him to like reel it back and be as restrained as possible. That does seem like, for whatever we can say about the character, that does seem to be the character.
He did. He was nominated for an Oscar that year for the role.
Who did he lose to?
Cliff Robertson and Charlie.
I do not know
who
what
that
Charlie
is,
is.
and I'm not seeing Charlie.
And Sandra Locke was nominated for actress in a supporting role, but she lost to Ruth Gordon in Rosemary's Baby, which checks out.
Oh wow!
Yeah, that does check out. Yeah, I don't know.
I'm struggling to
love
come
to
up
hear
with things to say about this.
I would love
This
to
is-
hear the defense of this movie, since
Not to get us sidetracked, but Best Picture this year is Oliver. They also
oh my
nominate.
gosh,
They also nominate Funny Girl. Mind you, this is the year that Rosemary's Baby comes out and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Oh my god!
I don't mind.
And they
Oliver,
gave it to
but it is
fucking
hilarious.
Oliver.
It is hilarious that I don't know. I
Anyway.
want to hear the defense of this movie. Like, given that we were, you know, a patron asked us to talk about it, like, I mean, maybe it was a troll, but it doesn't sound like it was a troll, right?
I don't
Like,
think it was a troll. I
it sounds like
apologize if I've offended the sensibilities of this person who sincerely loves.
But I sincerely would like to hear, like, in more detail, what is the argument in this movie's favor? Because
Sounds like a good write-in.
Please do. I do want to hear about this, because it's not a movie that, if I weren't talking about this on this podcast, I would have already forgotten about it. You know, it's not a movie that is interestingly bad. It simply is like just a wafer of a movie that just has dissolved in my brain. And I'm struggling
A
to
wafer of a movie that is dissolved in my brain. Like,
That's film criticism.
Oh yeah.
Zach,
that on the
you did get
DVD.
me. You did get me sidetracked for the 2001: A Space Odyssey thing. 2001 wasn't even nominated for Best Picture.
No, I think it was special effects.
It
mean,
was nominated for Best Director, but
Yeah,
Kubrick
but
did
not
not
picture.
win.
Did
They
the
gave
director
it
of
to
Oliver
Oliver.
win?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Fucking Oliver, man. I was gonna say something, but I forgot.
I saw somebody on Letterboxd say they couldn't understand the Academy's love for Alan Arkin in this movie, except by just remembering that this is like the kind of performance the Academy likes to award.
That's true.
But he doesn't get the award. I mean, it's reminiscent of that scene that I'm not going to quote from Tropic Thunder, but like that comes to mind,
Yeah,
it's true.
But this does feel like an Oscar bait movie from a year gone by.
Yeah, for sure.
That
I love Tropic Thunder.
It's just kind of unmemorable, like so many Oscar winners now, will be in 10, 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this was like the Danish Girl of 1968. Like, was it like like was the pure representation of having a person who's not like a able-bodied person, like being, you know what I'm saying like
that's like, I want to put that on Letterboxd now.
That's
on
fantastic.
my review.
Yeah.
Is the Danish Girl of 1968. Oh my god, what a burn.
But I mean, like, those movies have conversations about them because of the issues that they bring up. I don't even know if the plots of the movies are engaging. I haven't seen The Danish Girl, but The Danish Girl is exclusively talked about because of trans representation or bad trans representation.
Or misrepresentation,
right?
yeah.
And like, is that true of this movie, where the mere representation of a deaf person, that is the reason why this was interesting for people, or maybe not interesting if it was bad, disability representation? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel so far removed from that moment. Like, I don't even, this was like a commercially successful movie, right?
At least moderately so.
It made $1 million off of what were we saying? Like a $200,000 budget? I don't know.
Well, I mean, at that time, none of these actors are like big. Like, this is Alan Arkin's first major film role. Stacy Keach, this was his first movie ever. Sandra Locke, her first movie ever. So it's not like it was a super expensive movie.
Yeah,
I kind of want to see the version. I kind of want to see the version of this that included Montgomery Clift, Zero Mostel, and was directed by Sidney Lumet. That sounds
for real.
insane.
There's a lot of alternate universe versions of this movie, or like the low budget indie film that the person was going to make. Yeah. I want to point something out while we're talking about awards. This is apparently nominated for AFI's 100 Best Film Scores list. It did not make it, but I could not tell you what the film score was.
No.
What was the film score?
I was surprised. I was surprised to see that James Wong Howe was the cinematographer on it.
Yeah, I would not have.
Not that anything stood out really.
Right, I was about to say there's nothing that stood out about the cinematography that made me think I'm interested in who the cinematographer is. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a big name for this.
Yeah, I was just like, damn, all right. I don't know. It was a movie that went through my eyeballs for 2 hours or whatever.
Listeners, doesn't this make you want to give us money to roast a movie of your choice?
Is this the second? How many patron picks have we? There's Romeo and Juliet.
Romeo and Juliet was one.
A big old we were just dunking at it the whole time. I feel like we've done the similar thing.
Well, the last
perhaps the worst movie we've covered on the show, honestly. Romeo and Juliet.
Well, the last movie that he suggested for Patreon was Best in Show. So
that was good.
We were positive on that one. We can't always be giving you the good. We can't be always giving you the aces. But we got an interesting one for next week. So,
do we know? Can you say, or is it a secret?
No, I can say. I was going to save it till the end, but
I kind of feel like we're at the end.
You want to do it right now?
Yeah.
Lay it on us, Zach.
All right. So Chad Newsom,
friend
of the pod, is asked us to watch Blast of Silence, which he says is a Christmas-themed noir.
Ooh,
Okay.
I've not heard of this movie.
Me neither.
No, but it looks like it's in the Criterion Collection. Yeah, seems kind of. I like the log line, which is a hitman comes to New York to kill a gangster and gets the gun from a big guy with a beard.
I love it.
Those big men with beards, you got to watch out.
You gotta be careful. I'm gonna see if Seth wants to be on this one. This seems like a Seth movie.
Truly.
All right. Any final thoughts on The Heart is a Lonely Hunter?
Oh man.
No.
No.
Oh, man. No. All right. Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you would like to support the show so we can roast your movie, head to patreon.com/Cinematary. I mean, if you just give us $1, it doesn't matter. Like, just give us $1 and we'll talk about a movie. That's what happens.
This is how
Romeo and Juliet.
This is how you know you can trust our journalistic integrity as film critics. We're gonna give it to you straight.
Right.
That's
We're
true.
not pandering to big money interests here.
We're gonna look you dead in the eye, call your movie The Danish Girl in 1968, and then move on with our lives. Thank you to our patrons for whatever reason support us: Cam, Chad Newsom, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marslathi, Titus Arthur, and Tyler Chandler. Thank you so much for your patronage. And like I said, next week, 1961's Blast of Silence.
Oh yeah.
Which sounds like it could be really entertaining or just something. I hope it's entertaining. We need a little boost. But after that week, we'll be doing our best of the year, which I feel like is probably, judging from the conversation we had today, will probably include the Fabelmans.
I would say so.
Maybe.
Fabelmans $1?
It's possible.
Old again, #1.
Ooh,
Old?
when is the new M. Night Shyamalan movie?
It's
coming out?
in January. I was really
it's
hoping
in
it was going to come in before the end of the year.
If
or
Reed
February,
swooped
maybe.
in and put it as his #1.
Yeah, Reed's going to just go ahead and boost that one up again.
Knock on the
The
cabin
jerk.
door, #1.
All right. Until next week, thank you all for listening.
Bye.